I put my closed-door romance book, Sparks in Iceland, on NetGalley to get more reviews for the book, and today I'm talking about the results. I'm also talking about why I'm putting a book on NetGalley again after having a semi-negative experience with NetGalley a couple years ago. So I'll be giving you all the stats behind how it went and what I did differently this time around on NetGalley to make it a more positive experience for myself. Hello everyone, my name is Mandy. I'm an author, the creator of the Book Launch Planner series, and I also have courses on book cover design and book formatting. I make weekly videos on the business of being an author, so if that sounds good to you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon. You can also join as a YouTube member to get early access to videos as well as behind the scenes content. So like I mentioned earlier, I've put a book on NetGalley before, but the experience was extremely different. Previously, the book that I put on NetGalley was a book called Meet Me at the Summit. Meet Me at the Summit is a coming-of-age romance, and it got a ton of reviews on NetGalley, but not all of them were great because NetGalley is vicious. Now, I have a full video on my NetGalley experience, as well as some basics about what NetGalley is and how you can use it as an author, and pros and cons to NetGalley. It's actually a 50-minute video. We are not going to be going into that much detail today. Today we're just talking about my experience with this particular book, Sparks in Iceland, and how I went on NetGalley and what I did differently and the stats, the results. But if you want a full in-depth video on NetGalley, I will leave that linked down below. I feel like you have to watch that video first, then come back to this one. But if you don't have time to watch the first video, the big thing you need to know is the first time I was on NetGalley, I worked with NetGalley directly. Now this second time I'm on NetGalley, I worked with a co-op, and the co-op works with NetGalley. Now, I don't know the best way to explain a co-op, but basically a co-op kind of sort of acts like a publisher on NetGalley, where they're the owner of the NetGalley account, and then other authors pay to have their books featured on NetGalley. This saves authors a lot of money, and it also gives us a lot more control of our books on NetGalley as well, because when you work through NetGalley directly and you don't have a certain account, you're kind of limited in terms of what you can do on NetGalley and what type of control you have. So when I worked through a co-op, I was still able to log into the co-op's NetGalley account, but I was able to then manage my book directly through the co-op account and do all that. This will make sense the more we start chatting. But that's the big thing, is the first time with Meet Me at the Summit, I worked directly with NetGalley. The second time with Sparks in Iceland, I worked with a co-op, and I'll tell you exactly who I used for a co-op as well. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about how my book was on NetGalley. My book, Sparks in Iceland, was available on NetGalley through September 1st through November 23rd. It was a bit of an odd date sort of situation because I also decided kind of sort of last minute to do a category spotlight, but the only spotlight spot that was available was in November, so I kind of just had to take it and then pay for more time to be on NetGalley to be able to get that spotlight feature. Now, because I did it through a co-op this time, it was much, much cheaper. I worked with Victory Editing. I will leave them linked down below, and I had a great experience because you can pay on a monthly basis, and then you kind of sort of have full control over how your book is listed on NetGalley. And I'm actually an affiliate for them. So if you end up wanting to work with Victory Editing and want to use their co-op, make sure to use the link down below. And also when you reach out to them, make sure you mention my name, Mandi Lynn, and tell them that I sent you, because that's how the affiliate program works. And if you're still confused about what a co-op is, I highly suggest just checking out their website. They'll have even more info than what I'll be talking about today. So, like I said, the biggest perk to working with a co-op is that the cost is much, much cheaper. So, let's talk about that now. I paid $126 for 3 months. And then later on, when I decided to do the category spotlight, I had to extend my time like almost another month and then also pay for the category spotlight. So that was $267.25. which meant I paid a total of $393.25 for my time on NetGalley. And I'll talk about the category spotlight later when I talk about things that I would do differently, because that's probably one of the things I would do different. But a category spotlight is just highlighting my book on the NetGalley website. So when people went to the romance section of NetGalley, my book was actually featured front and center, and it was the only book featured, which means it got a lot of eyes on it, which was very cool. Okay, let's go into stats, and I'm just gonna hammer through all the numbers. So this is all the stats for my entire time on NetGalley. The book got 6,239 impressions, 446 people clicked to read the book, 75 people ended up giving feedback, 71 ended up leaving reviews, because you can give a star review without writing like an actual review. And then 33 people added the book to their list, which, you know, I don't really know what that means. It could just mean they added it to a to-read list but didn't end up doing anything with it. And the next set of stats we have to talk about is activity, you know, how readers interacted with the book. I gave 340 people access to the book. I did not give access to the book to 122 people, and 2 people who were given access ended up withdrawing and changed their mind and said they didn't want to read the book anymore. So basically the way it works with NetGalley is that someone can choose to request the book, and then you as the author / publisher have to decide whether or not you're going to give someone access to it. You're able to look at their profile and you see a couple different stats, like what their average star rating is. They have a bio, they have their links, they have when they last wrote a review, that sort of thing. So you're able to get this little snapshot of each reviewer and decide yes or no whether or not you want to allow them to read your book. Now this was huge for the co-op, because when I worked directly with NetGalley, this wasn't an option. Anyone who applied to read the book was given access to read the book. Whereas with the co-op, I could pick and choose who was allowed to get access, and therefore could be a little more picky. But before we dive into that too much, let's move on in stats. Because one of the cool things that NetGalley does is it asks readers why they requested the books. Let's go through the stats of reasons for requests. 10% of people said they requested the book because of the author, that's me. 28% of the people requested the book because of the cover, this right here. 33% of the people requested the book based off of the description. 6% of the people requested the book because they kept hearing about the book. And 23% of people requested the book based on the title alone. I just think these are fun stats to look at. They're not super important, but as an author, it's fun to hear, especially when you can see if your cover and your description are working really well. Now let's talk about the ratings that the book itself got. Sparks in Iceland ended up with a 3.7 star average rating from 70 different members. It got 18 5 stars, 24 stars, 26 3 stars, and 6 2 stars, and 0 1 stars. I would actually consider this really good because, like I said earlier, the reviewers on NetGalley are vicious. And the last stat that I was given is the different opinions that people like booksellers, educators, librarians, and reviewers had. It's just like these quick percentages. I'll pop it up on the screen. You can pause the video and read it if you would like, but it's just kind of more additional fun facts. Now that we've talked about all the stats and the results, I really want to talk about what I did differently this time around to make NetGalley a very positive experience for me. So like I said, I worked with a co-op to save money. That was the first thing that I did differently. Let's put into perspective how much money I saved. If I want to be on NetGalley for 3 months, for the co-op, it would be $126 for 3 months. For working with NetGalley directly, it was $300 for 3 months. Now, I don't know if that's still the most up-to-date pricing for NetGalley, because this is just based off of the last time I went through NetGalley myself. It was $100 a month, so that could be different. But for comparison's sake, I'm comparing my experience last time to this time, and it was a huge cost difference. The second thing that I did super differently was I got to control exactly who read my book. Because like I said earlier, when you work directly with NetGalley, at least previously, when you worked directly with NetGalley, with the account that I had, I couldn't control who read my book. Anyone who wanted to read it could read it. I couldn't approve or deny readers. Whereas through the co-op, I can do that. So the strategy that I was given, it's suggested by Victory Editing, is they gave you a bunch of different tips on who to approve and who not to approve. And given those tips, this is kind of what I ended up doing. So I would only approve people if they had an average star rating of 3.8 or higher. Some people on NetGalley are super, super harsh. And if they had a star rating of 3.8 or lower, that meant that they were probably one of those really harsh reviewers, and I didn't want them reading my book and giving it really bad reviews. Or what typically happens, and what I've seen happen, is they'll give a really low star rating, but then the review will be like, the book was okay, or I enjoyed the book, but it's accompanied by this really harsh star rating that makes it look bad, even though the review itself isn't that critical. So I enjoyed having control over that side of things. When I was approving people, I would also keep in mind how recently they've written reviews on NetGalley. Like if they've been a member for years but have never submitted a review to NetGalley, or they haven't submitted a review to NetGalley in months, I would tend to decline them because odds are they're just reading the book and they're not reviewing the book. Or I would approve people who are brand new to NetGalley, like if I saw they just joined in 2025 but they haven't written a review yet, I would tend to approve that because I feel like everyone has to start somewhere, and if they want to start with my book, I'm okay with that. Now, the only time I didn't get to approve people myself was during my category spotlight, because when I signed up for my category spotlight, I didn't realize that I set it for read now, which meant that during my category spotlight, I could not approve or decline anyone. Anyone who clicked the read now button could instantly read the book. And I didn't quite understand that when I was choosing the options. So when I did the category spotlight, I could have done the approval process like I had been doing for the past 3 months, but because I was not understanding things, I had it basically set to auto approve for everyone. So that meant during my category spotlight, I got a lot of people downloading and reading my book during the category spotlight, and some of those people were harsh. And that's actually exactly when I got my first 2-star reviews, because up until that point, I had 0 2-star reviews. You know, I had, a small handful of 3 stars and 4 and 5 stars. It was a good mix of 4, 5, and 3-star reviews, like very legitimate and like normal reviews. And then when I did the category spotlight where anyone on NetGalley could read the book, that's when I started getting 2-star reviews. And like I said earlier, people can be really harsh. One of the 2-star reviews that I got was basically 2 stars. I enjoyed the book. And that was it. That was the whole review. I'm like, if you enjoyed the book, why would you give it 2 stars? But some people just read so many books that their rating levels are very, very different. But that's why having the approval process is important. And then also, I had a 2-star review because the book didn't have any spice. It's a closed-door romance. Obviously, they didn't read the full description on the book, because if they did, they would have read that it's a closed-door romance, but they missed the memo, and my book got rated poorly for that. But that's okay. A lot of those 2-star reviews tend to stay on NetGalley, and they don't put the effort into putting it on Amazon. Sometimes they'll put it on Goodreads, but we'll talk about that later, how NetGalley reviews don't always translate to Amazon reviews. The third thing that I did differently this time around is that I had a separate email just for NetGalley. I believe I did this towards the end of the last time I was on NetGalley, but basically when you have a book on NetGalley, you get emailed every single time someone writes a review of your book. As an author, I don't think that's a very good thing. I don't think you should be getting an email of the review every time your book gets a review, even if it's a good review. It's just very distracting. So I have a separate email account created entirely just for NetGalley. So whenever I get updates from NetGalley about feedback, the email goes there. So when I have a day where I'm mentally prepared, I go through that email, I look at it quickly, and I delete all the emails. I tend to not read my reviews very in depth, especially the critical ones. I kind of skim them to make sure there's nothing important that I'm missing. But for the most part, I kind of avoid reading negative reviews because honestly, as an author, reviews aren't for us. You can use some of the critical feedback for, writing future books, but for the most part, reviews aren't for us, and that's okay. The fourth thing that I did differently is that I put the finished version of the book on NetGalley. When you're doing NetGalley, you're putting up advanced reader copies of your book, and typically advanced reader copies are versions of the book that have not been proofread yet. And when I've done ARCs in the past through literally anywhere else but NetGalley, it wouldn't be the proofread version of the book because to save time, and I wanted to get reviews in advance, so to save time, I would give readers the uncorrected proof, and it was always very clear, this is an uncorrected proof, please don't let any typos influence your review, blah, blah, blah. I learned that doing that on NetGalley, not good. On NetGalley, they will mention the typos, they will ridicule you for the typos. So this second time I had my book on NetGalley, I made sure it was the finished final version of Sparks in Iceland. There should be no typos. That way, if anyone does mention a typo in the book, that means I actually did miss something and it's not just because it's a proof copy. And I am proud to say that no one mentioned any issues of typos or issues like that in their reviews. But that also meant that I had to have my book ready early, so keeping in mind, if I'd finished proofreading my book in August, so it could be ready for NetGalley in September, the book itself didn't get published until October. So that meant I finished my book way early ahead of time, so it almost felt weird to be done with my book, but to have it not be published yet. But in hindsight, I actually really enjoyed doing it that way because now my book was done, and for that last 2 or 3 months leading up to release, I could just focus on marketing. I didn't have to worry about whether the book was ready or not. Okay, so let's talk about the real results because we've already talked about the stats, we've talked about what I did differently. Let's talk about my actual thoughts and feelings on everything. At the time of filming this video, it is December, so things may have changed now that this video is live. But as of December, when I'm filming, my book on Amazon has 16 reviews. And those 16 reviews have a 4.5 star rating. And I have looked through the reviews. The majority of the reviews on Amazon are NetGalley reviews. I can tell because I recognize the reviews. They seem familiar. So obviously, the book has tons of reviews on NetGalley, not nearly as many on Amazon. But what you will notice is that the only reviews that translated over to Amazon were the really positive ones because the people that wrote the review really, really loved the book, so they put in the extra effort to review the book on Amazon. Whereas the people who were meh about the book didn't care to put in the extra effort to review it on Amazon, which frankly kind of sort of okay with me. And this is still just the beginning, so we'll hopefully see reviews build up more and more over time on Amazon. But if your goal for putting your book on NetGalley is to have a ton of reviews on Amazon, I would say skip NetGalley because the reviews just don't really translate that way to Amazon. However, let's talk about Goodreads because on Goodreads, the book has 77 ratings and 60 reviews because again, Goodreads let you do star ratings without actually having to write a review. But the average star rating on Goodreads as of right now is 3.84, which I feel like is a really good star rating for Goodreads because again, it's kind of similar to NetGalley where people can be super, super critical on Goodreads. And basically, I think almost every single NetGalley review ended up on Goodreads. And the big reason for that is that you can't review a book on Amazon until it's published. So Sparks in Iceland wasn't published until October 21st. So if anyone on NetGalley read and reviewed the book before October 21st, odds are they only reviewed it on Goodreads and they didn't end up posting the review to Amazon later on. What I did end up doing a lot though is that if people reviewed the book on social media, like on Instagram, and then they tagged me, I would say, thank you so much for writing a review. If you could also leave this review on Amazon, that would be amazing and super helpful to me as the author. So that's kind of one of the things I did to help move reviews onto Amazon, especially if they were positive ones. At the end of the day, I'm actually very happy with these results because the majority of the reviews were really positive, and any that were like critical, I was like, yeah, I get it, and that's okay. The book wasn't for you, that's fine. And I feel like I still got a decent amount of reviews, and I feel like the cost was mostly worth it, minus the category spotlight, which I want to talk about now. Because I want to talk about, will I be using NetGalley again? And the fast and short answer is that yes, I do think I'll continue to use NetGalley again in the future, but I'll be using it through a co-op so I can have the same sort of control and experience that I had this time around. What I won't be doing again is I don't think I'll ever again pay for something like a category spotlight, because when I put my book up onto NetGalley, the first month, and you can see it in the activity chart, the first month it was hugely popular. It got tons of impressions. A lot of people were requesting it. Then after the first month, it got really quiet and like no one was requesting it. And it basically didn't see activity again until I did that category spotlight. And again, you see that it got a lot of impressions, but still not nearly as many impressions as when it first went up on NetGalley. Now, I don't know exactly why it got so many impressions right off the bat. I think it's because the book was posted through a co-op like Victory Editing, and Victory Editing has a reputation on NetGalley. They have a platform. They even do a little bit of social media where they feature your book on their Instagram page. It's not much, but it's something. So I think that really helped get eyes on the book early on. And frankly, I just didn't need the category spotlight. I kind of wish I hadn't paid for it in the first place. But I didn't realize right off the bat the book would be hugely popular. I kind of paid for it before it went live on NetGalley. Then when it went live on NetGalley, I was like, I don't think I need the category spotlight. And then even when I had the category spotlight, the impressions still weren't nearly as high and as popular as when the book was just first initially posted to NetGalley. So that says something. And I would have saved myself a lot of money. Like, it would have been basically actually less than half the price if I hadn't done the category spotlight. So that's really the only thing that I would do differently. Otherwise, I feel like everything went really, really well, and I am happy with my experience. Anyways, I think that's all I have to say about my experience with NetGalley this time around. As you can tell, just based off my attitude, I had a wildly, vastly different experience than the first time I was on NetGalley. I still recommend that you watch my other video on NetGalley if you haven't yet already, because I share a lot more information that's just general NetGalley knowledge, whereas this video is more specific to this specific instance of posting my book on NetGalley. Anyways, that's gonna be it. Let me know if you enjoyed this video in the comments down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you all for watching.